Our St. Vincent de Paul family is organized for one simple mission, and that's to bring God's love into the lives of those in need. We're all tasked with that when you really think about it. How can we make an impact on the world? How can we make a difference? Well, St. Vincent de Paul does that. We are often thought about as providing food or meals or what have you, but we're so much more. We're shelter, we're clothing. We participate in passcodes for kids, uniforms for kids, or simply when a family checks into the Bishop Ott Sweet Dream Shelter and we provide clothing for a child, their mother, shoes so that they can go to school, a belt, simple things that make a real difference. And that's what our show today will focus on. It's simple things where we can make a real difference in the lives of those in need.
St. Vincent de Paul was born to peasant farmers. He showed a talent for reading and writing, and at the age of 15, his father sent him to seminary, paying for it by selling the family's oxen. He is the patron saint of all works of charity. He is also known as the Apostle of Charity and Father of the Poor.
For over 20 years, the St. Vincent de Paul Community Pharmacy has served our area. We provide prescription medicines for those who have nowhere to turn for this most basic healthcare need. Please, if you need your medicine or you know a family member that needs their medicine, contact us. Kay, how can they get in touch?
383-7450.
Give us a call today and spread the word so that we can ensure no one goes without their prescription medication. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback about our spiritual segments through the years, and Father Michael Lello has done a great job before and is now with us to talk about why it's important to be courageous in our faith lives.
Yeah, you know, we hear in the scripture how many times God saying through Jesus, be not afraid. The Old Testament, the New Testament, it's all throughout the scriptures, that invitation not to fear. And yet we know when we look at the history, we look at the prophets, we look at the early disciples, and we look at the Canaanite people, the Israelite people, all throughout Scripture. There were moments in their journey where their fear prevented them from knowing God, preventing them from following God, prevented them from doing His will. And so we know that fear is a natural thing. Every one of us. Some people can't stand spiders or snakes or whatever your fear might be. I don't like tall buildings. I could never work on a bridge ever. But we all have our own personal fears. And so why wouldn't that affect our spiritual relationship? Why wouldn't that affect our journey with our God? Of course, there are going to be times when we become afraid to trust God, to trust where He's leading us, to trust what He might be inviting us to do. And yet again and again, God says, don't fear. Don't be afraid. Be courageous. C.S. Lewis said, courage, dear heart, courage. And I love that quote. It's so simple. Courage, dear heart, us, take courage. We overcomplicate everything. But sometimes the spiritual masters make it so simple for us. Be courageous in your faith. Be courageous in your trust of God. Be courageous in your willingness to love one another.
As a layperson, when I look in the mirror, I see my biggest stumbling block in my life is me, that anxiety, not being courageous, not being afraid. And sometimes that leads to a little bit of anxiety. And then it's kind of like, you know, I'm not worthy. We're all worthy, aren't we?
Sure. And I think the biggest stumbling block for us is right here.
Yes.
Us.
Exactly.
Us. How many times do we say to God, I can't do that. I'm not worthy of that. There's no way. I tell people all the time, when I was growing up, if you'd have told me that I would speak publicly in front of people, that would be my gift. And in high school, I remember vividly I was running for Key Club, which was a service club.
Yeah.
We used to do projects with
Yeah,
St. Vincent de Paul all
that's
the time.
right. Yes, indeed.
And, I was running for president, and I had to give my election speech, and I had my little note cards. And, of course, as soon as the talk started, I dropped the cards all over the floor, and it was just a disaster. And I thought, I never want to be in front of people. I'm not good at being in front of people. And yet, when I got out of the way, when we get out of the way and we let God use us, it's amazing what we find might actually be within us. And so now people can't get me to stop talking, and I love it. I love this gift that God has blessed me with, and I try to share it with others. But fear prevents so many people from using the gifts that God's placed within them.
And that's the key to really a strong spiritual life. Get out the way and get in line and do what's necessary to make the world a better place. That's a challenge that we all face. If we're not courageous, we just lose that opportunity. And the only person we can blame is looking in that mirror. It's funny, when I was headed over here, one of my staff members said, "Do you need anything else?" And I said, "Yeah, I need Jesus Christ." In a true sense, isn't that something we always should say when we get ourselves in a situation? Lord, help me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I, every day at Mass, before I preach, my prayer is real simple. Lord, use me today. Mm-hmm. Allow me to get out of the way so that your word, your message, your voice can come through me. I was a band guy growing up, so I relate to music and a musical instrument, and every musical instrument gets out of tune.
Right.
It needs to be tuned up. And the exterior of the instrument, a brass instrument, can become rusted. Yeah. And it doesn't matter. It can be rusty, it can be dented, it can be bent, but the sound that comes forth when it's in tune is beautiful. And if we would allow God to use us, if we could pray, Lord, help us to get out of the way so that you may use us, then great things could happen.
And that's the challenge. Sure. Be courageous. Don't be afraid. Remember that the Lord is there for each and every one of us, and He loves each and every one of us, doesn't He, Father
Without
Michael?
a doubt. God's love for us is beyond anything we could ever imagine. And so often people struggle to simply let God love them. And that's the challenge for us, to let God love you for who you are, a gift from our Savior. And I tell people, God doesn't make junk. God knew what He was doing when He created each of us, no matter how messy our lives is. God has used us. Our lives are messy. They are. That's reality. And yet He calls us to be courageous. He calls us not to fear. He calls us to go out into the world.
Feel God's love. Share God's love. That's our message today on Beacons of Light. What I love about the St. Vincent de Paul Society is all our great members. And joining me today is Mr. Reginald Brown. Welcome to the show, Reginald.
Hey, thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
You've been involved with St. Vincent de Paul now 4 years, and you are now president of the St. Jude Conference. Talk about that ministry, why it's important, and how it's kind of shaped you spiritually.
Sure, thanks. I appreciate the offer to come out and speak. I think what it does for us is really provide a sense of service for us, for me especially. When I stopped working, I kind of dove into volunteering and serving the community. And this gives me a great opportunity to do that. I like the very direct, face-to-face assistance that we give to the community and those that are in need. And our home visits, which one of our volunteers takes me on, Tom Randolph takes me on every once in a while, are very interesting because we get to come into folks' homes, see where they actually live, and actually serve them there. It's, I think someone else had talked about, it's not the sterile office environment type thing, but it's in their homes. It's very personal, very spiritual, very, very intimate when we help them there.
Well, not only do you make those home visits, which is just a part of the society that's so very important, y'all also do things like Thanksgiving baskets and Christmas baskets. Right. Talk about that and why that's important to the community, especially the poor.
Yeah, it's. I think it's very good because at Christmas and at Thanksgiving, we send out about 150 letters to folks that have come in to the assistance throughout the year. And we provide them with a basket of food, a turkey, And we have the Cub Scouts there, and they actually take them out to the car with them and help them out. And then Christmas, we provide them with a basket of food, a ham, and toys for the kids. And it's very good. I really can't say enough about it because it's that opportunity where we actually get to see them face to face and ensure that they are not left out during this holiday period when especially those that are fighting for their livelihood can have some stress in their lives. So we really try to make sure that this is one area, food and toys, where they're not stressed.
So not only do you relieve their need, but you also respond directly to making sure that Christmas is alive and well, that Thanksgiving meal is there, so that during the holidays, St. Vincent de Paul is doing that Christmas spirit of giving, right?
Indeed, indeed. And it continues all year long. It continues all year long. That's the one thing I like about it is that we don't forget folks. And I think you and I have had this conversation. We aren't so large that you have to do mounds of paperwork and make sure that every T is crossed and every I is dotted. But when people come in and say that they need help, we help them. It's not a long, tedious red tape process. And I hope we never get to that point. And we've done a good job so far of being able to say, hey, you need help, we're going to give it to you.
Well, you know, y'all have a great conference and you have a great membership, and we decided to shoot this in the pharmacy, and we come here, and there's some great St. Jude, St. Vincent de Paul members right here today working, and we're going to do another segment where we visit with the Georges and visit with you together and talk about why it's important to come together as a community and to serve those in need in a variety of different ways. St. Vincent de Paul members visit the poor throughout our community, and joining me is Kim Boudreaux. Let's talk a little bit about St. Aloysius, St. Vincent de Paul, and how you got involved and what keeps you going.
So I got involved early, one of the founding members, when the nuns left St. Aloysius. There was one particular that was doing emergency assistance, and so we
Sister
wanted,
Josephine.
Yes, and so we wanted to continue that tradition, and so we revived our St. Vincent de Paul conference. It was funny because at first we were adamant that we were not going to go out into the community because for safety reasons, and then we started training under Our Lady of Mercy. And we went out and we said, there's no other way we can do this but to go out in the community and meet people where they live.
Yeah.
So that was very eye-opening.
Yeah, and you know, we're right here in the busy St. Vincent de Paul dining room. We're getting ready in about a half hour to serve our daily meal, but going out in the community is a little bit different than a dining room. You get to visit someone in their home. That can be a powerful experience.
Yes, because they're in need of something, but they have this deep faith that someone's going to provide what they need, and then it's our honor and privilege to be that person, to be Christ for them. You know, because of the support of St. Aloysius and the money that they provide, we're the privilege that get to go and meet their needs.
Which is powerful. And these powerful stories, I'm sure all the years that you've made visits, you've had stories that kind of touch your heart. Any that come to mind?
Well, there was one actually just last week. There was a young man that moved to Baton Rouge for a job, and then the place closed, and so he lost the job, and he's really been hunting for a job a lot. And he was going to be evicted, so we worked with the landlord, said we'll pay partial rent if you, and he had just gotten a job. And so we said we'll pay partial rent if you'll let him pay the rest next week, and they said yes, and he said yes, and so then we went to visit with him, and he was actually broken down on the side of the road.
Oh, wow.
And so we actually met with him on the side of the road.
Wow.
And he said, everybody has been saying no. And said, well, today we're saying yes. And he had just gotten a job. That was a yes.
Yeah.
And the landlord had said, we'll take partial payment. So that was a yes. So he gotten 3 yeses. And so it was powerful, and we prayed right there on the side of the road.
Well, you know, I've heard of many stories in 28 years visiting people in the home, but this is the first car visitation that I think St. Vincent de Paul has ever made that I've been aware of. But it's powerful.
Unique.
God's everywhere.
Correct.
And it sounded like, from what you just described, this young man needed to hear a yes from God.
Yes.
And in a lot of ways, you're the disciple that delivered it along with the other St. Vincent de Paul members.
Actually, the first time when I called him to try and set up the visit, he said he was in the parking lot in his car praying to get help somehow.
Isn't that powerful?
It's awesome.
I mean, you know, God has
awesome.
God has a master plan, and that we get to participate in some small way is powerful, and for somebody to then see that participation, that young man, that's just powerful. So you made a home visit, a car visit, and then you helped somebody in the home, all in one case.
Yeah.
And so that's what St. Aloysius, who has several members that are very active.
Yes.
That's what it's all about, helping people one at a time.
One at a time. And it's discouraging sometimes because you're not going to eliminate poverty, but for that one family, that one person, you're changing their life.
Yes, indeed.
You're helping them over a rough patch.
Well, I can tell you that St. Vincent de Paul Society does that every day in the Baton Rouge community, and we encourage you to get involved with us. Go to svdpbr.org, see how you can get involved and become an instrument of God's master plan.
In the early 1800s, people often died from diseases like smallpox, tuberculosis, and cholera. Born in 1813, Frederick Ozanam, the founder of St. Vincent de Paul, was the 5th of 14 children, one of only 3 to reach adulthood. A cholera epidemic in 1832 made Frederick decide to put his faith into practice. His first act of charity was to take his supply of winter firewood and bring it to a widow whose husband had died of cholera.
During this year's series, we wanted to talk a lot about Vincent de Paul and Louise de Marillac and the entire Vincentian family, a family that is really focused on serving those most in need. How Vincent de Paul, now we know him as St. Vincent de Paul, how he has inspired millions throughout history to reach out to those in need. One person very close to the St. Vincent de Paul Society that he inspired was Frederick Ozanam. In 1833, Frederick was a law student at the Sorbonne in France. During his studies, the students would debate one another. And they debate on a number of different subjects. Frederick was an out-of-this-world debater. He could debate anyone on any issue and typically win, even if the merits of his case weren't quite as good as whoever he was debating. Well, one debate, some of the students had realized that he was Catholic, and they wanted to debate him on service to the poor. They wanted to debate him on Matthew 25, for I was hungry and you gave me food. And so Frederick was open to that debate, and during the debate, they asked him about his faith, challenged him, and then after talking about serving those in need, the question his opponent proposed was, what are you doing? What are you doing to serve those most in need? How are you fulfilling that gospel call to seek and find the forgotten? And Frederick, a great debater, had nothing to say. He had nothing to come back with what he was doing. So he sought counsel. He went to Sister Rosalie Rendu, who is now blessed by the church. Frederick is also blessed by the church as well. And he went to Sister Rosalie, who was a daughter of charity, and said, what am I to do? How am I to respond? Sister Rosalie went to her example, Vincent de Paul. Now, this was in the 1800s. And so a couple hundred years had passed since Vincent de Paul walked the earth. But she said, let's look at how Vincent de Paul led a life of searching and serving Christ. And from that, Frederick said, hey, sister, what if we get students and others involved and we go out and make home visits to the poor in the spirit of St. Vincent? She thought it was an awesome idea and gave them spiritual guidance as they grew spiritually. And that's the beginning of the St. Vincent de Paul Society in Paris, France in 1833. It started from that, what are you doing to help the poor? And just like in 1833, that question was very important. It was important to Frederick. It was important to all those he got to get behind him to establish the St. Vincent de Paul Society. And it's important to each one of us today. What can we do to respond to that need? We are called to seek and find the forgotten, those who are suffering. What can we do? We say, join our St. Vincent de Paul family right here in the Diocese of Baton Rouge. Get involved in one of our many Vincentian programs that are here today to reach out to serve those in need. The Society of St. Vincent de Paul's first cookbook, Taste and See, is the gift which helps share the goodness of the Lord with those most in need. Featuring recipes from Chef John Foles, each chapter begins with a short story about one of our special work programs. To order your copy of Taste and See, please call the Society or visit our website. Help multiply blessings for the neediest in our community. St. Paul is such an important part of our St. Vincent de Paul family. Their conference and their members like their president, Janet, work diligently to serving the needs of those in need here locally, whether it's regular times or during times of disaster. Janet, you were affected by the flood of 2016.
Yes, I was. It was something that I'll never forget. We had about 5 feet of water in our house, and we pretty much lost everything. And in addition to the cars, we were left with my husband's old truck. And all of a sudden I say, well, we're the Beverly Hillbillies. But it was a time of, not only was I affected by it, but so many of my church members that attended St. Paul and surrounding churches also were affected. So it was devastating. However, St. Paul came to the rescue, in addition with St. Vincent de Paul, and getting grants and funds for us from people from other states also. So it was an outpouring of love. And for the first time, I was on the other end of it. I was receiving this goodness from the Lord. So during the midst of a horrible time, there were so many things for me to be thankful for, that I knew that God was still working in my life because He was providing me with the things that I needed in order to survive. And I couldn't have made it without St. Paul, the church, and St. Paul, St. Paul, the conference, St. Vincent de Paul is what I was trying to say, I'm sorry. Because they made us feel as if it was a gift from the good Lord, that I was thankful that they were there and available, to assist us. And so I really got the true picture of St. Vincent. I'm able now to look at it from both sides. And it is so important for us to continue in these efforts, to be there for future disasters,
and to help people that are in need. And so God has revealed to me so much in terms of, even though you go through trials, there's always something to be thankful for. And things like St. Vincent, things like the church members, people in the community, that shared with us, and helped us to come back. I'm back in my house now, and, I thank God for the experience, because in life you have to go through things. It's not always going to be good. There are going to be things that are not so good, but there's a purpose for everything. And I think I had to learn from this certain things, such as being humble, to be humble. He humbled me, but he showed me also that these things, these material things, were not of the value that we had been putting on them. There's other things that is more valuable, in terms of the fact that my husband and I cling to each other, because all of a sudden all we had was ourselves. And so it improved our relationship, it strengthened our faith, and it just provided us with an experience that the good Lord felt that we needed to go through at that time.
Well, Janet, thank you so much for sharing that, because it's powerful, because I think you described the St. Vincent de Paul Society very, very well, because you talked about the outpouring of love, you talked about the humility, you talked about losing everything but your faith, and how unimportant those material things are. And I think for us, the gift of the society is something we'd love to share with everyone out there in the audience. Consider joining us, growing in your spirituality, by going to svdpbr.org and see how you can join the society and follow in people's footsteps like Janet and others that are making a difference and living the gospel every day of the year. Our St. Vincent de Paul members are making a difference. You saw that in today's show. What great examples of people living a life of faith, doing so with one purpose, to love one another. That was Christ's message to us, to love one another, and by doing so, spread his love throughout our community and world. That's our message to you. Do that. Do that first with your family, your friends, and the broader community. And get involved in serving the needy, because when you do so, you serve Christ. Go to svdpbr.org to see how you can get involved in our St. Vincent de Paul mission of charity.